My son and his wife had been living in my house for 7 years. When the baby was born, my daughter-in-law shoved my wife and shouted, "Do not touch him. You are filthy." My blood froze. I called my son and said 3 words that left them stunned. My name is Richard Hale, and I am 69 years old. I spent 38 of those years as a public school principal in Trenton, New Jersey, the kind of job that teaches you to read a room before anyone speaks. I thought I knew people. I thought I knew my own family better than anyone else in the world. That Tuesday morning taught me how wrong a man can be inside his own living room. The day began with the gentleness that used to define our house. Helen, my wife of 46 years, was humming something from the radio while she arranged garden roses in a tall glass vase. She wore her soft blue cardigan, sleeves pushed to her elbows. When the sun moved through the lace curtains, it lit the silver in her hair like fine wire. The kettle clicked off, and I poured coffee into the mug with the chipped handle, the one our son made in 8th grade ceramics class. For a moment the kitchen smelled like everything good we had built together. Buttered toast, fresh flowers, coffee, home. Then a cry pierced the air. Not the ordinary mewl of a newborn, but a sharp wail that seemed to slice the house down the middle. Helen looked up at me and smiled the way she has smiled at every good thing that has ever entered our lives. Our grandson, 3 days old, and already the axis of our family. I heard the living room floor creak. And then Vanessa's voice came, clipped and exact. "Richard, ask Helen to keep the noise down. The baby needs quiet." There was no hello. No please. Only edicts. Delivered with the certainty of a person who believes she is in the right, by definition. Over the past years that certainty had crept across our house the way ivy finds brick and does not let go. Helen lifted the vase gently and walked toward the living room. She had spent weeks preparing for the baby. She set aside a drawer in our bedroom with tiny folded onesies, stockpiled soft blankets, labeled little baskets for wipes and diaper cream, as if preparing a small ship for a safe voyage. She was not a woman who forgot things. She was not careless. She was a grandmother whose hands had carried our son through fevers and night terrors and scraped knees. And the lonely year he missed a friend who moved away. Her hands were clean. Her life was clean. From my chair I heard Vanessa mutter something I could not catch. I heard the baby hiccup and then fuss again. I heard Helen's thoughtful footsteps cross the rug. There is a sound a house makes when something sacred is broken. It is not loud. Not at first. A breath pulled in. A vase tilting. A sharp, startled, "Oh," water hitting hardwood. The thud of knees. And then silence so heavy the air itself seems to stop. I stood up so fast my coffee sloshed onto the table. The living room doorway framed a picture I will never forget. Helen on the floor, her cardigan dark where water had splashed it, pink petals scattered like small flags of surrender. She pressed her palms to the wood as if steadying the earth. Vanessa stood above her, our grandson in her arms. Her face twisted with a disgust I could not reconcile with the woman we had welcomed into our home. "Do not you dare touch him," she said, voice ringing. "You are dirty. Look at this mess." I am not letting filthy hands near my son. For a beat nothing moved. Even the baby stopped crying, as if curiosity had pushed back hunger. Helen looked up, confusion and hurt mingling in her eyes. She had not reached for the baby. She had reached to steady the vase. She opened her mouth and then closed it. And in that small motion, I saw years of swallowed words. I crossed the room and crouched beside her. "Let me help you," I said. She nodded. A single small motion, and placed her hand in mine. It was warm and familiar and trembling. As she rose, the roses slid across the floor, leaving thin trails of water that found the grain in the wood and disappeared into it. A strange calm came over me. I took in everything the way I used to on the first day of school. When 100 details told me the story, no one was saying out loud. The high chair assembled in the spot where Helen's reading lamp used to be. The bassinet parked in front of the mantel, blocking the photos from our hiking trip last fall. The baby monitor camera panned toward the chair where I always read the paper. Its small green light, a fixed eye. Our living room had been rearranged into a stage where only one person's rules mattered. Vanessa shifted the baby and lifted her chin. There was triumph in that posture. It was not the triumph of a mother protecting her child. It was the triumph of a queen discovering that the throne fits. "Michael," I called. Not loudly, but with the tone he has always answered. From the hallway his footsteps approached, unhurried, as if summoned to a question he already knew how to answer. He stopped just inside the doorway, gaze moving from the water blooming across the floor to the petals, to his mother's face, to the iron set in Vanessa's jaw. "What happened?" he asked. But not to us. He asked it to the air, to the situation, to the baby, to no one. "Your mother needs to stay in the bedroom when the baby is in the common areas," Vanessa said, "for hygiene." The word lay between us like a verdict. There are 1,000 ways a son can fail his parents, and most of them begin with silence. Michael said nothing. He let the sentence rest where it landed. His eyes did not meet mine. I remembered, without choosing to, the tally of small losses that had led here. The day our kitchen was declared too cluttered for modern food prep, and Helen's spice tins were boxed and stored. The afternoon I found the recliner. I have sat in for 20 years, pushed to the corner, because it did not fit the flow of the room. The week our bedroom was moved upstairs so the nursery could have the master suite, because stairs are not practical for a new mother. The word practical can excuse anything if you say it with enough certainty. Helen bent and began to gather the petals. She did it the way she does everything, with tenderness that refuses to embarrass the thing being rescued. I took the vase from the floor and set it on the mantel. My hands left small crescent moons of water on the glass. Vanessa held my grandson a little higher and tilted her body away from Helen, as if the very nearness of a woman who had birthed and raised a son to adulthood constituted risk. The contempt in her eyes was not sudden. It had been growing a long time in the shadows, where we keep the things we do not want to speak about. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger exactly, though anger was there, bright and hot. It was resolve. The kind a man finds when the ground shifts, and he decides he will not fall with it. "Michael," I said, "come here." He glanced at Vanessa, then at me, and stepped closer. He held his hands half open, palms up, a gesture I had seen him use as a boy when he wanted to show he was listening without promising to obey. "This is not about noise," I said. "This is not about germs. This is about respect. Your mother is not dirty. She is your mother. This is our house." Vanessa snorted softly and adjusted the baby's cap. I saw how the gesture covered the smile she did not quite let loose. I looked at Helen. The humiliation on her face was not loud. It was the quiet kind that seeps into a person over years until they look smaller, and you do not notice because you have calibrated your eyes to the slow fade. "Enough," I said to myself, and then I said it out loud. "Michael," I said, and for the first time that morning he looked me in the eye. His expression flickered. I recognized a boy who had built a bridge out of excuses, and was realizing it would not hold. Michael shifted uncomfortably under my stare, glancing back at Vanessa, who was still holding the baby as if she were the guardian of a treasure no one else could be trusted with. My son's lips parted, but instead of outrage, instead of defending his own mother, he whispered words that stung more than any scream could. "Dad, she's just protective. New mothers get anxious. It's normal." I blinked at him, stunned. Protective? Anxious? My wife had just been shoved to the floor in her own living room, called filthy as if she were a stranger off the street. That was not protection. That was humiliation. Helen had gathered the scattered roses into a small pile on the coffee table. Her hands trembled faintly, but her face was composed in the way it always was when she was forcing her heart to endure something quietly. I could see the tears she would not let fall. Not in front of them. Vanessa spoke, her voice dripping with certainty. "Michael's right. I am just doing what's best for our son. Babies are fragile. Germs are everywhere. Helen, I know you mean well, but at your age, hygiene can be a real concern. It would be safer if you stayed in your room when he's in the main areas. We can bring him up if needed. At your age," as if Helen were some decaying relic, instead of the woman who had nursed Michael through the scarlet fever, who had stayed up every night of his teenage years waiting for the door to open, so she knew he had come home safe. My fists clenched at my sides. "Vanessa," I said slowly, "this is not your house. You do not make rules here about where Helen can or cannot walk." She smiled faintly, like I was a child who had misunderstood something obvious. "Richard," Of course, it's your house. But we live here too. We have to think about what's best for the baby. You want him healthy, don't you? Healthy. The word twisted in my gut. She had turned it into a weapon. Michael stepped forward, putting a hand lightly on her arm. Maybe we could compromise. Mom. Maybe just let Vanessa handle the baby for the first few weeks. You'll have plenty of time later. Helen looked up, her mouth opening in a silent gasp. Compromise? He was asking her to compromise her dignity, her right to be a grandmother, her right to simply exist in her own home. I turned to him. Son, do you hear yourself? Your mother raised you without a single parenting book, without sanitizing every surface like it was a surgical room. She gave you life and love. And now you want her to ask permission to hold her grandson? Michael's jaw tightened. It's not about permission, Dad. It's about keeping things peaceful. Vanessa's been through a lot with the pregnancy. She just wants control over how things are done. Peaceful. That word. I had used it myself too many times over the last 7 years. Keeping things peaceful meant swallowing the little insults, ignoring the way Helen was moved aside, pretending not to notice how the furniture was rearranged, how meals were criticized. Peaceful had been a prison disguised as patience. Helen's voice broke through, quiet but firm. Michael, I carried you for 9 months. I woke up every 2 hours to feed you. I worked 3 jobs when your father went back for his master's degree. I am not dirty. I am not dangerous to my own grandson. Do you understand me? For the first time, my son's eyes faltered. His lips pressed tight, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw the boy he once was, the boy who used to cling to Helen's apron strings, who used to cry if she was late picking him up from school. But then Vanessa shifted the baby in her arms, and Michael's shoulders hardened again, like a man retrained to another loyalty. Vanessa cut in sharply. Helen, no one said you were dangerous. Just unsuitable for direct care right now. It's not personal. It's medical. Not personal. The words rang hollow in the quiet. Everything about this was personal. I stepped closer, my voice low. Vanessa, let me be clear. My wife does not take orders in her own home. She does not need your permission to walk, to breathe, or to love her grandson. She stared back, unflinching. Then maybe it's time to discuss boundaries. We all live here. We all contribute. I almost laughed. Contribute? She had never worked a day since moving in. Every bill was paid from my pension. Every meal cooked from Helen's careful grocery lists. Every comfort supplied by us. But before I could respond, Helen placed a trembling hand on my arm. Richard, she whispered. Not now. And in that small plea, I felt the weight of every year she had endured silently, trying not to upset the fragile balance we had let them build. My anger wasn't just for today. It was for all the days I had looked away. I turned to Michael. Son, I said, my voice steady but cold. This is not about germs or boundaries. This is about respect. Tell me, when was the last time your mother was welcome in her own kitchen? When was the last time she sat at this table without being corrected? When was the last time she wasn't made to feel small in her own home? Michael's mouth opened, but no sound came. Vanessa's grip on the baby tightened. The silence stretched, heavy as a storm cloud about to break. This is not about a baby, I said finally, each word sharp as glass. This is about respect. And I will not let my wife be erased from her own life. For the first time, Vanessa's confident mask flickered. And in that tiny crack, I knew the battle had only just begun. That night, I couldn't sleep. Helen lay beside me, her breathing steady but shallow. The way it gets when she's pretending to rest, so I don't worry. I stared at the ceiling, the plaster lines blurring into cracks of doubt. The image of her on the floor replayed over and over, the water stains on her sweater, the roses scattered like broken promises, and Vanessa's voice cutting through it all like a blade. You're filthy. It was almost midnight when I decided to go downstairs for water. The old floorboards creaked under my weight, familiar sounds in a house that had once been our sanctuary. As I reached the bottom step, I froze. Voices. Not just any voices, Vanessa's. Low. Sharp. Deliberate. She was in the dining room, phone pressed to her ear, her words slicing through the quiet. No. It's perfect, she whispered. And I leaned against the wall, straining to hear. We basically have the house to ourselves now. Helen stays upstairs most of the time. And Richard? He's easy to handle. He doesn't like confrontation. Hell, give in. He always does. My grip tightened on the banister until my knuckles whitened. She paused, listening. Then a laugh light. Confident. Cruel. Honestly, it's like winning the lottery without even buying a ticket. Free house. Free food. Built-in babysitting. They'll never kick us out. Why would they? They're too sentimental. Too soft. By the time they realize what's happening, well, have everything exactly how we want it. The floor seemed to tilt under me. Everything exactly how we want it. What did that mean? I held my breath as she continued, her tone dripping with certainty. Michael doesn't even notice. He thinks I am just being careful. A protective mother. He lets me make all the decisions. I've been setting this up for years. Piece by piece. The words rattled through me like cold iron. For years. Not days. Not weeks. This was not new mother anxiety. This was design. I backed up the stairs slowly, careful not to make a sound. In our room. I closed the door gently and leaned against it, my chest heaving. Helen stirred, opening her eyes instantly. She always senses when something is wrong. Richard? She whispered. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. It was warm, familiar, trembling slightly. She's planning something, I said. She's been planning it for a long time. Helen blinked, confusion creasing her face. Planning what? To take this house. Her breath caught. No. She whispered. She wouldn't. She would. I heard her. She laughed about it. She said, Wed, already lost control. That by the time we noticed, it would be too late. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The house groaned around us, old pipes sighing as if the walls themselves had been listening. The next morning, I went to the basement. Our old filing cabinet had been moved down there years ago when Michael and Vanessa converted my office into a nursery overflow. Dust clung to the handles, but the lock clicked open easily. I rifled through folders, tax returns, insurance papers, warranty slips for appliances, long dead. Then I froze. Nestled between property tax receipts were utility bills, gas, electric, water, internet. Not in my name. Not in Helen's. In Vanessa Hart's. My heart slammed against my ribs. Not one or two bills. 6 months' worth. All current. All addressed to our home. And at the bottom of the stack, folded neatly, a form I recognized instantly. A. U. S. Postal Service mail forwarding request. Effective date. 6 months ago. Recipient. Vanessa Hart. My mouth went dry. She had redirected our mail, our bank statements, insurance notices. Everything through her name first. I stumbled back, clutching the papers like they might burn me. Upstairs. Helen was preparing breakfast. Her movements slow, quiet. Careful as always. I placed the stack in front of her on the kitchen table. She looked down, her eyes scanning the documents. At first confusion. Then, dawning horror. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Richard, what does this mean? It means she's building a paper trail. If utilities and mail are in her name, she can claim this house as her primary residence. Maybe even claim we're the guests here. Helen's face drained of color. But this is our home. We have the deed. I nodded. But the weight of the papers in my hand told a different story. If she's trying to establish legal occupancy, the deed might not be enough to avoid a fight. Her eyes brimmed with tears. She tried to hold back. She's trying to erase us. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed from the hall. Vanessa appeared. The baby nestled against her chest, her face painted in false concern. Is everything all right? She asked sweetly. You both look upset. I held up the stack of bills. Why are the utilities in your name? For just a second, the mask slipped. A flicker in her eyes, calculation. Not surprise. Then the smile returned. Oh. Those? There was some mix-up with the companies a while back. They kept sending things wrong. So I fixed it. I put them in my name temporarily to make sure nothing got lost. I meant to mention it. For 6 months? I asked, my voice low. She laughed lightly. Has it been that long? Time flies with a newborn. I'll call tomorrow and switch it back if it bothers you. Bothers me. She said it like I was being unreasonable. And the mail forwarding? I pressed. This time, the pause was longer. She shifted the baby, stalling. I don't know what you mean. The post office is redirecting our mail through you first. Why? Her tone sharpened. Just slightly. That must have been some clerical mistake. Maybe when I updated my address after moving in. Postal forms are confusing. Honestly. Richard, I don't see why you're making such a fuss. Helen's voice trembled but cut through. Because it's our home, not yours. For the first time, Vanessa's smile cracked. A flash of something colder gleamed in her eyes before she masked it again. We're family, she said. Voice honeyed but hard underneath. Families share. Families help each other. I've been taking care of this house. Organizing things you two don't have the energy for anymore. That should count for something. It wasn't help. It wasn't sharing. It was theft in slow motion. As she walked away, humming softly to the baby, Helen gripped my hand. Richard, she whispered, her voice shaking. She's not just living here. She's taking over. I looked at the papers again. The official stamps. The signatures. The weight of years of generosity had become chains. And for the first time in my life, I was afraid not of losing respect, but of losing everything. The next few days, I walked through my own house like a stranger. Every corner felt touched by hands that weren't mine. Every drawer rearranged. Every hallway echoing with Vanessa's voice telling us how things should be done. But it wasn't until Helen quietly mentioned something Shed seen the week before that the pieces clicked together in a way that made my blood run cold. She was sitting at the kitchen table, folding laundry, when she said it. Richard, she began, hesitant. There was a man here last Thursday while you were at your doctor's appointment. Vanessa said he was from the county assessor's office. He looked around, took notes, asked questions about property values. She handled everything. I assumed it was routine. I froze. What did you just say? Helen looked up, puzzled. A man from the assessor's office. He was here for maybe 30 minutes. Vanessa said it was standard for taxes. He had a clipboard. I didn't think anything of it. My chest tightened. Did you see his credentials? She shook her head. No. Vanessa met him at the door and said, Shed take care of it. He never even looked at me. I grabbed the phone and dialed the Mercer County Assessor's office. After being passed between 3 different clerks, I finally reached a woman named Sandra who could check official visits. No. Sir, she said firmly after a pause. We don't send our assessors door to door without prior written notice. We don't have any record of an appointment scheduled for your address. And certainly not last Thursday. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. So whoever came to my home wasn't one of yours? I can say with certainty we didn't send anyone, she said. If someone claimed otherwise, it wasn't legitimate. I hung up slowly, staring at the receiver as if it had betrayed me. My pulse roared in my ears. Someone had been in my home, claiming authority they didn't have, and Vanessa had let them in. That night, while Helen slept fitfully, I went back to the basement filing cabinet. Something inside me whispered that I hadn't uncovered everything. The air was cool and smelled faintly of dust and old paper. I opened the bottom drawer and began pulling out folders one by one. Receipts, warranties, tax forms, and then, tucked between property tax assessments and old insurance policies, I found it. A blank deed transfer form. My hands trembled as I held it up to the bare bulb light. The property description section wasn't blank. It was filled in with the exact legal language describing our house. The plot number. The boundaries. Whoever wrote it had precise information. The kind not easily found online. And in the margins, written in neat, looping handwriting I recognized from countless grocery lists and sticky notes around the house, were Vanessa's notes. Check title office process. Tax valuation equals $420. 000. Need signatures, find notary. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. She wasn't just living here. She wasn't just redirecting bills. She was studying how to take the house from us completely. I carried the form upstairs and spread it on the kitchen table. When Helen came down for tea in the morning, she saw it and went pale. She covered her mouth with both hands, whispering, "Richard, what is this?" "It's a deed transfer," I said quietly. "She's been planning to move this house into her name." Helen's eyes widened with terror. "But she'd need our signatures, wouldn't she?" "Maybe. Or maybe she's trying to find a way around it. Forgery. Coercion. I don't know. But she has details about this property that she shouldn't have." Her hands shook as she picked up the paper. Where would she even get this information? I didn't want to say it, but I knew the answer. From the man she let into our house. Whoever he wasn't from the county. He was here to gather details, and she gave him access. Helen sank into a chair, staring at the document as if it were a bomb. "She's trying to steal our home, Richard." Before I could respond, the front door creaked open. Michael stepped inside, holding the baby carrier. His face was tired, lined with sleepless nights. But when he saw the papers on the table, his brows furrowed. "What's going on?" I pushed the deed transfer toward him. "Where did this come from?" "Michael, because your wife had it hidden in our filing cabinet." He blinked, confused, then picked it up. His lips moved as he read, and slowly, his expression darkened. This is a property deed form. Why would Vanessa? That's what I'd like to know." I cut in. Michael rubbed the back of his neck, guilt flashing across his face. "Dad, a couple weeks ago, she started asking me strange questions. About inheritance laws. About what happens if elderly parents can't manage their affairs anymore. About guardianship. I thought she was just anxious. You know, thinking about the future. I told her not to worry about it." My stomach turned. "Guardianship?" He nodded, shame heavy in his eyes. "She asked if a family member could take over someone's property if they were incapacitated. I thought she was just being paranoid." I slammed my fist lightly against the table, making the teacups rattle. "Paranoid? Michael? She's been transferring our bills into her name, redirecting our mail, letting strangers into our home, and now she has property transfer paperwork filled out. Does that sound paranoid to you or calculated?" Michael's face went pale as he sank into the chair opposite me. He ran a hand through his hair. "Oh my God. I didn't think." "No. You didn't," I snapped, anger finally breaking through. "And your silence has given her all the space she needed to try to steal from us." He looked at Helen then, and the sight of her trembling hands must have broken something inside him. His voice cracked. "Mom, I swear. I didn't know. I would never let anyone hurt you." Helen's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She only whispered one word, "But you did." Michael bowed his head, the truth heavy on his shoulders. For a moment, the kitchen was silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "Son, listen to me. This is not just a misunderstanding. This is fraud. This is theft. Your wife is planning to take everything from us, piece by piece. And if we don't stop her now, she might succeed." Michael's eyes snapped up to mine, finally seeing the storm for what it was. What are we going to do?" I held his gaze. "We're going to fight back. And she's about to find out just how wrong she was when she thought we were too weak to stop her." The following morning, I drove into downtown Trenton with the deed form and the stack of utility bills tucked under my arm. The streets were busy with commuters, the usual rhythm of life carrying on. But I felt detached, as if I were walking through a world that no longer belonged to me. My own home had become a battlefield, and I needed someone who understood the terrain. I pushed open the heavy glass door to Delgado and Pierce, attorneys at law. The receptionist recognized me immediately. Frank Delgado and I had known each other for years, though only in passing at community meetings. Frank was a former prosecutor turned family lawyer, a man with sharp eyes and a reputation for cutting through lies like a scalpel. He ushered me into his office, a warm room lined with shelves of case files and law books. His handshake was firm, but when he saw my face, his brow furrowed. Richard, what's going on? You look like you haven't slept in days. I laid the papers on his desk without a word. Bills. Mail forwarding. The deed transfer form with Vanessa's notes, scribbled in the margins. He leaned forward, reading in silence, the corners of his mouth tightening with each page he turned. Finally, he set the papers down and steepled his fingers. Richard, what you're describing isn't just disrespect or family drama. These are the exact steps someone takes when they're preparing to establish legal occupancy, or worse, when they're setting up a claim for adverse possession. The words hit me like a punch. Adverse possession? You mean squatters' rights? Frank nodded grimly. In New Jersey, the law requires 20 years for a claim like that to succeed. But don't get comfortable. Judges look at patterns of control and evidence of primary residence. Utilities in her name, mail redirected. Strangers pretending to be assessors, that's a paper trail. And if she keeps at it, she can at least argue she has tenancy rights. That makes removal a whole lot more complicated. I sank back in my chair, my chest tight. You mean she could actually claim my home? She can try, Frank said, his voice even. And even if she fails, the process could tie you up in court for years. I've seen good families lose thousands just to defend what was rightfully theirs. I stared at the documents on his desk. They looked so small, so ordinary. Yet they carried the weight of every memory Helen and I had built in that house. Our first Christmas as newlyweds. Michael's first steps across the living room rug. 40 years of laughter. Arguments. Ordinary mornings with coffee and the newspaper. All of it could be weaponized against us by the woman we'd let into our home, out of generosity. Frank leaned forward. Richard, I need to ask you something difficult. Has Vanessa been getting outside legal advice? Because these steps, they're too calculated to be accidental. This isn't just paranoia. It's methodical. The thought chilled me. She's been asking Michael about inheritance laws. Guardianship rights. He thought she was just anxious about the baby. But now I don't know. Frank exhaled slowly. Then you need to assume she's working with someone. Maybe a friend. Maybe an online advisor. Maybe worse. But she didn't come up with this on her own. I rubbed my temples. So what do I do? He opened a drawer and pulled out a crisp folder, sliding it toward me. First, document everything. Every bill that isn't in your name. Every piece of mail that got redirected. Every note she's written about the property. Make copies. Keep them secure. I nodded. I've started that. Good. Second, I am drafting a formal notice. It will require her to return all utilities to your name within 30 days. Cancel the mail forwarding immediately. And acknowledge in writing that she has no claim to the property. That document, signed and dated, will give us leverage. And if she refuses? I asked. His eyes hardened. Then we move forward with eviction proceedings. Painful. Yes. But legal and final. And Richard, he hesitated before continuing. I am also filing a preliminary complaint with the county prosecutor's office. Fraud. Identity theft. And attempted property theft. If she's been forging signatures or letting imposters into your home, that's criminal. You need the law on your side. The weight of his words pressed against my chest. Eviction. Prosecutors. Criminal charges. This wasn't just family conflict anymore. This was war. Frank leaned back, studying me. One more thing. You and Helen need to be careful. If she's willing to manipulate paperwork and bring strangers into your home, you don't know what else she's capable of. Lock up your valuables. Secure your IDs, passports, financial documents. Don't leave anything lying around. I swallowed hard. Images flashed through my mind. Helen's jewelry box. Our passports tucked into the desk drawer. The old lockbox in the closet with our will. For the first time, I wondered how much Vanessa already knew. I stood slowly, gathering the papers back into their folder. Frank, I've spent my whole life believing family meant loyalty. That if you gave and gave, eventually respect would follow. I was wrong. He met my eyes with steady calm. Respect isn't given freely, Richard. It's protected. Guarded. You're not wrong for being generous. But now it's time to draw the line. Driving home, The folder sat heavy on the passenger seat like a sleeping animal with teeth. I glanced at it every few minutes, feeling its weight more than I could explain. The familiar streets blurred past the diner. Helen and I had eaten at every Friday night. The church where Michael was baptized. The park where we used to push him on the swings. All of it tied to the house that Vanessa was trying to turn into hers. When I pulled into the driveway, Helen was waiting at the window. She opened the door before I reached the porch. "What did he say?" she asked, her voice small, fragile. I handed her the folder. "He said we're not imagining it. He said she's making a move. And if we don't act, she could take everything." Her face went pale as she flipped through the documents Frank had prepared. "So what happens now?" I looked at her. The woman who had built a life with me brick by brick. The woman who had been shoved aside in her own home by someone who thought kindness was weakness. My voice came out steady. "Now, Helen, we stop being quiet. Now we fight." But what neither of us knew then was that Vanessa had already taken her schemes one step further. And the evidence of it was waiting for us upstairs. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon polish when I set the folder down on the table that evening. Helen was slicing bread for supper, her hands moving carefully, but her eyes kept darting to me, waiting. I told her everything Frank Delgado had said: the eviction notice, the legal risks, the possibility of criminal charges. With each word, I watched her shoulders sink further, as if the walls of our home were pressing in. "Richard," she whispered, her voice thin, "what if she fights? What if Michael sides with her?" I covered her hand with mine. "Then we show him the truth. He can't ignore it forever." The sound of footsteps interrupted us. Vanessa entered, baby balanced on her hip, her hair perfectly arranged as if exhaustion never touched her. She looked at us with a practiced smile. "What's this?" she asked, her eyes flicking to the papers spread across the table. I straightened, my voice steady. "Vanessa, sit down. We need to talk." Her smile faltered. She adjusted the baby, hesitating for just a moment before lowering herself into the chair opposite me. The baby squirmed, fussing, and she rocked him gently. "What's so urgent?" I pushed the utility bills toward her. "Why are these in your name?" For the briefest second, her mask cracked. Then she gave a light laugh. "Oh, that again, Richard? I already explained. There was a mix-up with the companies, so I stepped in to handle it. Honestly, I thought you'd be grateful." "And the mail forwarding?" Helen asked, her voice trembling but strong enough to cut the air. Vanessa tilted her head, pretending confusion. "Mail forwarding? I have no idea what you're talking about." I slid the form across the table. "You redirected every piece of mail for this house to come through you first. Don't pretend it was a mistake. I've spoken to the post office." Her jaw tightened, though she tried to hide it behind another laugh. "Really? Richard, you're overreacting. I was trying to streamline things. With the baby, I don't have time to explain every little decision. I thought you'd appreciate someone taking care of the details." Helen's hands clenched into fists on the table. "Taking care of details is not the same as stealing our home." The words hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa's smile slipped, replaced by a cold flicker in her eyes. "Dealing? That's a very strong word. I've been running this household for years. Cooking, cleaning, managing bills, organizing everything. Don't I deserve a say in how things are done?" I leaned forward, my voice sharp. "You deserve respect as our son's wife. As the mother of our grandson. You do not deserve ownership of this house. You do not deserve to shove my wife and call her filthy." Vanessa's nostrils flared, but she held my gaze. "Maybe if you two weren't so outdated, I wouldn't have to step up. This place was falling apart before I moved in. Someone had to modernize it. Someone had to take control." "Take control?" Helen repeated, her voice shaking now with fury. "This is my home. I cooked every meal here. Raised my son in these rooms. Who gave you the right to take control?" For the first time, Vanessa dropped the act completely. She leaned back in her chair, her smile gone, her tone hard and edged with contempt. "Because you can't handle it anymore. Look at you. Forgetful. Slow. You're elderly, whether you admit it or not. You should be grateful, I've been holding things together. The silence that followed was deafening. Helen's face went pale, her lips trembling as she struggled not to cry. I pushed my chair back and stood. Enough. This is not your house. Vanessa. It never will be. She clutched the baby closer, her eyes flashing with defiance. We've been here 7 years. 7. At what point does this become our home too? At what point does sweat equity turn into ownership? My jaw tightened. When you buy your own house. Until then, you are guests. Guests who have overstayed their welcome. Her voice rose, sharp as a whip. You can't just throw us out. We have a baby. We've built our life here. Do you really want to put your grandson on the street because you're clinging to a deed? I leaned forward, my voice low but lethal. I will protect my wife and my home, even if it means protecting them from you. Vanessa's face twisted with rage. She stood abruptly, nearly jostling the baby. If you dare push this, I'll take him. I'll leave, and you'll never see your grandson again. Do you understand me? Never. The words sliced through Helen's heart. She gasped, clutching the edge of the table. I felt a fury I hadn't known in years rise in my chest. But before I could speak, another voice cut through. Michael's. He stood in the doorway, his expression pale but firm. Vanessa, he said, his voice shaking. Don't you dare use my son as a weapon. She spun to face him. Michael, they're trying to destroy our family. They want to throw us out. They want to take everything from us. No, he interrupted, his voice stronger now. You did this. You've been lying, scheming, treating my parents like strangers in their own home. I've ignored it for too long, but I won't anymore. Vanessa's mouth opened, but Michael raised his hand. If you try to take my son away from his grandparents, if you keep this up, I'll divorce you, and I'll fight for custody. Her eyes widened, her face paling. For once, she looked truly shaken. You wouldn't? Michael's jaw set. Try me. The baby whimpered, sensing the storm around him. Helen reached out instinctively, but Vanessa turned away, clutching him tighter. Her mask had slipped completely, now no sweetness, no innocence, only desperation. The kitchen had become a battlefield. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the baby's small cry seemed magnified, stretched thin over the breaking point. I looked at my son, standing taller than I'd seen in years, and felt a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. Pride that he had finally found his voice. Sorrow that it had taken this long. Helen's voice was soft but steady. Vanessa, you've made this house a prison. But tonight, the walls just cracked. Vanessa's lips trembled, but no words came. She turned and stormed down the hall, the baby's cries trailing after her. Michael sank into a chair, his face pale, his hands shaking. Dad, he whispered. What do we do now? I set the folder back on the table, the legal documents heavy with possibility. Now. Son, we finish this. She thinks she's in control. She's about to find out what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. The following week was one of the longest of my life. Every hour felt like a countdown to the storm that was about to hit. I had met again with Frank Delgado, our lawyer, and handed over every document, every piece of evidence I had gathered. The man was meticulous, his sharp eyes scanning the forged utility transfers, the mail forwarding order, and the property notes with quiet intensity. Richard, he finally said, your daughter-in-law has been building a case of occupancy and control, whether she realizes it or not. These are the first steps someone might take toward claiming tenant rights or even attempting property fraud. But you've caught her early. If we serve her with official notices and make this public in the eyes of the court, she won't stand a chance of succeeding. I nodded, but there was no comfort in his words. The thought of taking my own son's wife to court, of dragging our private misery into a courtroom, filled me with dread. Still, I knew it was necessary. I couldn't allow Everly's schemes to destroy Helen, our home, and the life we had built. That Tuesday morning, the knock came. A uniformed process server stood at our door, folder in hand. I watched from the window as Vanessa opened it. At first she smiled, probably thinking it was a delivery. Then her face stiffened as the man read her name aloud and handed her the packet. She froze, baby balanced in one arm, the other clutching the envelope. For a moment I thought she might collapse. But then her expression twisted into fury. She slammed the door, her voice carrying through the walls. "Michael, get in here right now!" I stayed in the kitchen, waiting. I knew this confrontation belonged to her and my son. Minutes later, the sound of shouting filled the house. Vanessa's voice was shrill, laced with rage. Michael's was quieter but firm, growing stronger with every word. I caught fragments: fraud eviction, my parents home enough. When the door burst open, Vanessa stormed into the kitchen, papers in hand. Her face was blotched red, her breathing sharp. "How dare you?" She spat at me. "You went behind my back. You called lawyers. You turned my husband against me. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I rose slowly from my chair, keeping my voice calm. "I protected my wife. I protected my home. What you've been doing is illegal, Vanessa, and now it's over." Her hands shook as she waved the papers. "This is harassment. You can't just throw me and my child out on the street. I'll fight you. I'll fight you with every lawyer in the state if I have to." Michael stepped in behind her, his face pale but resolute. "Vanessa, stop. It's done. You've gone too far." She turned on him, her voice cracking. "You're really going to take their side? After everything I've done for us? For you? For our son?" Michael's jaw tightened. "You didn't do it for us. You did it for control. And you nearly destroyed the only people who have ever truly had our backs." The baby stirred in her arms, whimpering at the raised voices. Vanessa shifted him automatically, tears springing to her eyes, not the crocodile tears she often used, but raw, frightened ones. "If you stand with them, Michael, I swear you'll regret it. I'll take our son, and you'll never see him again." That was the final straw. Michael's voice cracked but did not waver. "If you try to take him, I'll fight for custody. And I'll win. Because no court will give custody to someone who tried to steal her in-laws' house with forged documents." Her face drained of color. "You wouldn't." "I would," he said, his voice steady now. "For his sake, I would." For a long moment, the kitchen was silent except for the ticking clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Vanessa stared at him, at me, at Helen, who stood in the corner with tears in her eyes but a spine of steel. Then she turned and stormed out, the sound of her footsteps pounding down the hall. 3 days later, Vanessa moved out. She packed her clothes and personal items, but she left the rest behind. The crib we had bought, the baby monitor, the furniture she had rearranged without asking everything, stayed. She took the baby to her sister's apartment across town. Michael was devastated, but he stayed. For the first time in years, my son sat across the dinner table from us without tension, clouding his face. He held his head in his hands that first night and whispered, "Dad, I don't know how I let it get this far." Helen reached over and touched his hand. "You see it now. That's what matters." The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Our lawyer filed formal complaints of mail fraud and attempted property fraud with the district attorney's office. Vanessa was summoned to court. The evidence was overwhelming: utility bills in her name, the postal forwarding order, and the deed transfer drafts in her own handwriting. The courtroom was packed the day of the hearing. Vanessa sat with her lawyer, her hair perfectly styled, her face composed into a mask of wounded innocence. But when the judge read aloud the charges and displayed the evidence, I saw the cracks appear. Her hands trembled as she tried to explain it all away as confusion and miscommunication. The judge wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Nailtamper Ellis," he said firmly, "this is not a misunderstanding. This is a calculated attempt to assume control of property that does not belong to you. This court recognizes it for what it is: fraud." Michael sat beside me, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. When the judge turned to address him, his voice softened. "Mr. Miniway Ellis, you've petitioned for temporary custody of your son during these proceedings. Given the evidence of your wife's actions, and her threats to remove the child from his grandparents' lives, I find your petition justified. Custody is granted to you effective immediately, pending further review. The sound that came from Vanessa's throat was half scream, half sob. She leapt to her feet, shouting, "You can't do this. He's my baby." But the bailiff stepped forward, guiding her back to her seat. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack. Court is adjourned. As we walked out, Michael carrying his son in his arms, the weight of the past 7 years seemed to lift just a little. Helen walked beside me, her face pale but calm, her eyes fixed ahead. Outside the courthouse, Michael turned to me, his voice low. "Dad, thank you. For everything. I should have stood up sooner. I let her make me believe it was normal. But you never gave up." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You're standing now. That's what matters." That night, as we sat in the backyard, Helen humming softly while our grandson dozed in her arms, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The battle wasn't over, yet there were still custody hearings, probation terms, restitution to be decided, but the worst was behind us. The house was ours again. Our lives were ours again. And for the first time in a long time, hope had returned to our home. Spring arrived early in New Jersey that year, painting the sky with soft blues and scattering blossoms across our backyard. I sat on the porch one evening. The same porch where Helen and I had spent countless nights wondering if our kindness had been a mistake. This time, though, the air felt different. Lighter. Free. Michael was inside, settling the baby for bed. Helen was humming softly as she tended to her roses. And I, for the first time in what felt like forever, felt at peace. The legal storm had finally passed. The court had granted Michael full custody, with supervised visitation for Vanessa. She had been convicted of mail fraud and ordered to complete 2 years of probation, community service, and pay restitution for the legal costs we had incurred. It wasn't prison, but it was accountability, something she had avoided her entire life. When the gavel came down in that courtroom, I saw the illusion of control shatter in Vanessa's eyes. For years, she had acted as though our generosity was weakness, as if kindness meant she could push boundaries without consequence. But in that moment, she learned that every lie has a breaking point. Michael struggled in the weeks after the judgment. He was quieter, more thoughtful, weighed down by guilt for what he had allowed. One night, as we sat on the porch after dinner, he spoke in a voice thick with regret. "Dad," he said, staring out into the yard, "I failed you. I failed Mom. I let her run this house, treat you both like you were burdens. And I let myself believe it was just easier to keep the peace." I leaned back in my chair, the wooden slats creaking beneath me. "Son, you failed yourself most of all. But listen to me, failure doesn't matter as much as what you do after. You stood up when it counted. You protected your child. That's what I'll remember." Helen joined us, drying her hands on her apron, her eyes warm but sharp. "Michael," she said, her voice steady, "you are our son. Nothing will ever change that. But from now on, you must promise me something. Don't confuse silence with peace. Sometimes silence only feeds the very storm you hope to avoid." Michael nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "I promise, Mom." Life began to heal in small, steady ways. The house no longer echoed with tension. Helen's laughter returned, her joy in cooking meals no longer overshadowed by criticism. She took our grandson into the garden, showing him how to smell lavender without crushing it, how to press soil around a seedling with gentle fingers. His laughter filled the air, a sound that melted away years of bitterness. As for Vanessa, she moved into a small apartment across town. Rumors reached us. She had tried to charm another family, another circle of friends, but her reputation followed her. Without control of our home, without the leverage of threats, she became just another woman trying to rebuild. I didn't hate her. In truth, I pitied her. Her hunger for control had left her empty-handed, her schemes unraveling in the light of truth. 3 years later, Michael bought a modest house, only 5 blocks away. It wasn't grand, but it was his, bought with his own earnings, maintained with his own effort. He invited us over for Sunday dinners, and this time, Helen and I sat at the table as honored guests, not shadows in the kitchen. Our grandson, now running across the yard with scraped knees and a wild grin, always asked to come back to our house. To swing on the old set Helen and I had built together. Sometimes I would sit on the porch swing and think about how close we had come to losing everything. If I hadn't found those papers in the basement, if I hadn't overheard her phone call, if I had let my fear of conflict keep me quiet one more year, maybe even one more month, Vanessa might have succeeded. But she didn't. Because one day, I stood up. I remember the 3 words I told my son in the kitchen when the truth came spilling out. Words that changed the course of everything. This stops now. That's all it took, 3 words to draw the line. 3 words to protect the woman I loved. 3 words to reclaim the dignity we had given away too freely. Family is built on love and respect, not manipulation. Generosity is a gift, not a weakness. And silence in the face of cruelty only allows cruelty to grow. I share this story now because I want others to understand the lesson it took me too long to learn. Kindness must walk hand in hand with boundaries. To give without expecting gratitude is noble, but to allow someone to trample your dignity in return is not generosity. It's surrender. Tonight, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in gold, Helen placed our grandson on her lap. He giggled as she pointed out a butterfly fluttering near the roses. Michael stood beside me, his shoulders straight, his face calmer than I'd seen in years. "Dad," he said quietly, "thank you for saving our family." I shook my head. "No, son. We saved it together." And I realized then that the true inheritance I wanted to leave behind wasn't the deed to the house, or the bank accounts, or the trust funds. It was the lesson that respect is non-negotiable, even within families. Especially within families. That was the legacy I wanted my grandson to grow up knowing.